Irish egg rolls are about as Irish as they are Chinese. They're a purely American bastardization of two great things, egg rolls and corned beef and cabbage. I first came across these when I cooked at a bar called Blind Bob's, and we served them as a St. Patrick's Day special. Well, with the upcoming Irish holiday, I figured I would improve upon the old recipe and give you all something to pair with your green beer. Oh, and if you're wondering why I'm not wearing anything green for a St. Patty's Day video, it's because f*** you, that's why. If you try to pinch me, we're gonna fight. The first thing we're gonna do here is make some Thousand Island dressing to dip the egg rolls in. Anytime you're able to make a sauce yourself, it's generally miles better than anything you'll buy at the store, and this is no exception. Homemade Thousand Island slaps. Because of the various components, there are different levels of scratch you can make this from. This is like a level 1 scratch, but I'm going to teach you guys how to make mayonnaise in a few moments, so maybe a level 2. Step 1 is to simply fine dice a tablespoon of white onion and set it off to the side. The hardest part of this would be realizing that you still have a whole ass onion left over. Onions are versatile though, I'm sure you'll find a use. Next you'll need the juice of half of a lemon. A nice trick you want to hold on to when juicing any citrus is to firmly roll your hand across it first. This loosens up the fruit and makes it juice more easily, which we'll do in a second. For now, crack a room temperature egg into one of those Talenti gelato containers that you always keep because they're just so damn great for storing stuff. It's important for the egg to be at room temperature as it will whip and emulsify better than a cold one. If you forgot to pull it down ahead of time, you can place it in some warm water for a few minutes to bring it up to temp. We're actually going to pause here so I can explain exactly what we're going to be doing. So, mayonnaise is typically made in a blender, a food processor, or, if you're really old school, a whisk. It starts with an egg, and then with the slow addition of oil during the blending process, it creates what's called an emulsification, which basically means a mixture of two liquids that don't normally mix together. This is usually a bit of a pain in the ass because the oil has to be added slowly or it won't emulsify with the egg, which always ends up with you standing over top of the blender with like a measuring cup full of oil, and you're blending the egg and you're just slowly pouring it, and your arm just starts getting tired and it's just a big pain in the ass. The method I'm going to be showing you here comes from J. Kenji Lopez Alt, author of The Food Lab, which is my favorite cookbook and I've mentioned several times on this channel before. His method allows us to add all the ingredients at once and still make a great mayonnaise in a fraction of the time. The caveat here is that it's done with an immersion blender. It's important that the vessel that you blend in has a circumference that's just barely larger than that of the immersion blender head itself, something that our Talenti container is perfect for. This works because the egg gets blended first and then the vacuum created by the spinning blades sucks the oil down to create the emulsification. Isn't science cool? Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming. After you've cracked your egg into your Talenti container, who should definitely be sponsoring this video after 3 mentions, squeeze your half lemon in. But squeeze it over your hand to catch any seeds that pop out, and also to determine if you have any cuts that haven't fully yet healed. Top that off with a teaspoon of mustard powder. Finally, pour in a cup of canola oil and allow it a few moments to settle. I know that looks awfully dark for a canola oil, and I'll explain in a moment. Now, just gently place the immersion blender all the way in the bottom of the mix and turn it on. Give it a few seconds to blend the egg first, then slowly pull up and watch the alchemy occur right before your eyes. And with a quick jump cut, you'll notice that the mayo suddenly has a brighter hue. This is because I originally got curious and tried to make it with sesame oil. What I didn't know, however, is that much like extra virgin olive oil, sesame oil is high in polyphenols. Without getting too deep into it, this essentially means that when the oil is blended at a high speed, the water-soluble polyphenols are rapidly dispersed, causing the mayo to turn bitter. So I had to yeet that batch and remake it with canola oil. Anyway, salt to taste. A couple pinches worked just fine for me. And I know mayo doesn't usually get any black pepper, but y'all know how I feel about the stuff. Portion out a half cup of the creamy egg sauce and add to it 2 tablespoons of ketchup, a tablespoon of white vinegar, 2 teaspoons of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of sweet pickle relish, and the onions that we cut up earlier. Give it a good mix and you'll have some Thousand Island dressing that's better than anything from the store. Remember how I said I was going to improve upon the old recipe? Well, I'm doing that with the addition of mashed potatoes. These aren't going to be anything crazy though. The utility of these is to add a creamy texture, so they don't need to be anything over the top. Start out with about 3/4 of a pound of red potatoes. Why red? Well, if I'm being honest, I didn't feel like peeling potatoes, and red potatoes have a very thin skin, so they don't detract from the flavor or the texture if you leave them on when you mash. Also, they don't have to be petites, like what you see me using here. That was just the smallest bag I could buy. And obviously, that's more than 3/4 of a pound. I wasn't completely sure how much I would end up needing, so I just cooked the whole thing, because no one has ever been upset about leftover mashed potatoes. Start the potatoes in a pot of cold water, and yes, I washed them. I just dumped them into the pot for the shot. Calm down. Anyway, you want to start with cold water because in doing so, the potatoes will heat evenly with the water so you don't end up with a partially cooked tater that's still hard in the middle. Bring your hot water to a boil and cook for 20 to 30 minutes. Use this time to prep your other ingredients. If this looks weird, it's because I prepped most of the sauerkraut before I realized that I wasn't recording. Luckily, there was nothing imperative that you missed. This step is super easy. Get a 1 pound bag of kraut from the store unless you find yourself with 1 to 2 extra weeks to ferment it yourself. All you need to do here is remove as much moisture as possible from your probiotic cabbage. I recommend just wrapping it up in some cheesecloth and squeezing the absolute hell out of it. It's that simple. Then you just add a ½ pound of corned beef to it. Get some sliced from the deli and tear it up. I guess you could chop it up if you really wanted to, but you already washed your knife and you don't want to do any more dishes. Give it a good mix and your potatoes should be just about ready. You'll know the spuds are done when they're fork tender. As you can see here, the fork is going in with almost no resistance. That's what you want. Now, like I said, these aren't going to be anything crazy. Throw in a ½ stick of butter and a splash of milk. Not too much though, because you actually want these a little bit on the dry side. Use a potato masher to mash them, then add your salt and pepper to taste. Now of course, this Irish and Chinese fusion that uses a German food as a primary component wouldn't be complete without Swiss cheese. We want as much regional accuracy as possible. Shredded or sliced Swiss will work just fine, but I like to get mine by the block, so if you're doing the same, slice off a plank and quietly eat it while staring at the wall. Then slice off a few more, as many planks as egg rolls you plan on making, to be exact. Oh, and because I do things out of the logical order, add your potatoes to the beef and kraut mix and get it all nice and incorporated. Now comes the fun part, actually building the egg rolls. I'm using vegan egg roll wrappers for this, but not for any real reason other than that's all the grocery store had for some reason. They tasted fine though, honestly, so don't hesitate if that's what you can find. Lay the wrap in a diamond orientation and put a spoonful of the mix in the center. Use your fingers to form it evenly and place a small divot in the center. Put the cheese in the divot and then place another spoonful on top, again using your fingers to even it out. Now, similar to a tortilla, roll the back flap forward over top of the filling, then fold the sides in and roll forward just a little bit more, keeping it tight but not so tight that the wrapper tears. For the remaining bit of flap that's left in front, wet the tip of your finger with some water and use it to moisten that little bit. Finish the roll and it should seal itself shut. If you're still not clear on how to do this, there are probably instructions on the back of the wrapper package. Don't feel bad, I used them too. Okay, I say this every time we deep fry on this channel, and I'm going to continue to say this every time we deep fry on this channel. Deep frying is not a f***ing joke. If you're not careful when you do it, you can severely hurt yourself or even burn your f***ing house down. I obviously don't want to discourage you from doing it, but it's important to understand the risks involved. Be cautious and stay attentive during this process and you should be just fine. Using a fry-appropriate vessel like a stock pot or my trusty Dutch oven here, heat your preferred frying oil to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I prefer peanut oil, but anything with a high smoke point such as canola or vegetable oil will work just fine. Gently place each egg roll into the oil, cooking in batches, about 3 or 4 at a time. It's important to remember that you don't want to overcrowd your fryer, as each one you add is going to lower the temperature of the oil, causing uneven cooking, longer cook times, and overly greasy egg rolls. Cook for 5 to 7 minutes, turning the rolls once until they're golden brown and crispy. Allow the oil a moment to drip off as you remove them, and then place them on a paper towel lined plate to absorb any more excess oil. Give these at least 5 minutes to cool off, unless you plan on scorching the entire fuck out of your mouth. Of course, these will cool faster if you cut them in half to get a good cross section. Now, there's no real reason to plate up an egg roll fancy, but you should know by now that if I can, then goddammit, I'm gonna. If you want to do some unnecessary plating as well, place a small spoonful of Thousand Island on one side of the plate, and give it a quick swipe with the spoon. Then, stack 2 diagonally cut halves of an egg roll on top of each other, and take a moment to admire your work. If you like this video, do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up button, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you have a suggestion for a video you'd like me to do in the future, I'd love to read about it in the comments. Oh, and I don't have too much time to stream these days, but if you like gaming content, you can follow me at twitch.tv/launchpadcooks. Finally, if you have a few minutes, take my viewer survey to help me make the best videos possible. Links, as always, are in the description down below. Enjoy! Okay, so, this is the egg. Dude. Holy f***. Which is really a pain in the ass, because you end up, dude, come on. Oh my god. It's just a big pain in the ass. Now, the method I'm going to be showing you here comes from The method I'm going to be showing you here comes from Cage. I can't say his name. Now, the method I'm going to be showing you here comes from Cage. It's not a K. Bruh. What the The caveat here is that it's done with an immersion blender. And the vessel that you actually blend in has to be just bigger in circumference than the head. The caveat here is that it's done with an immersion blender, and it's imperative the vessel that you actually blend in. Bro, what are you doing? The caveat here is that it's done with an immersion blender. I can't do this sentence. Anyway, back to our regularly scheduled programming.